everyone, Sheree here from Ashima Living. I'm a naturopath, yoga and mindfulness instructor, and I help busy burnt out mums overcome anxiety and low mood naturally and without nasty side effects. And last week, if you caught my live, I spoke about normal blood tests you can get from your GP to help investigate some of these symptoms. And today I wanted to talk about some little known tests that can uncover the real reason behind why you may be feeling tired, anxious or blue. And by little known tests, I'm actually referring to what we call functional medical testing. So functional medical testing is basically tests that you can get done at a functional medical lab or an integrative medical lab that are kind of beyond the standard pathology testing that you would get with your GP. And they're a little bit different in the sense that most of the time your GP, for example, is testing to diagnose a specific disease, and they're not going to run any tests if it's not going to change the course of treatment. So for example, if they know you have a headache, they're going to treat that headache, other than say, ruling out anything potentially dangerous that could be causing the headache. But it's pretty much, this is the problem, this is the treatment. Whereas functional medical testing is a lot more nuanced, and it's looking at potential metabolic, hormonal, biochemical, nutritional imbalances that could be like the downstream causes behind your symptoms. So this is really useful for us as naturopaths. They're also used by functional and integrative GPs because that's our wheelhouse. That's what we do. We try not to just treat the symptoms, but to find out the individual causes behind your symptoms, and each person gets a completely different treatment based on those causes. So today I wanted to talk about the particular tests that can be useful when you've got anxiety, depression or fatigue to possibly figure out what might be happening. So one of the first tests, it is actually a test you can get done with your GP, and this is a full thyroid panel. But the issue is usually when you get a thyroid test from your GP, because they're regulated, by the government and funding and that kind of thing, they just test one thyroid hormone first, TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. And they don't do the full panel unless you're out of range with that TSH. The problem is that range, it really is too broad, and this is a topic that's been covered by endocrinologists as well. It's not just me as a naturopath saying this. It is way too broad. You can be at that upper, let's say you have a low thyroid, you can be at that upper level of TSH, like around a 4. In America, it's even bigger. The cutoff is 5. And be having thyroid symptoms, but they're not going to investigate further until you're over that reference range. And some people are in the early stages, so it may not have gotten that far yet, or they may have what's called a swinging thyroid, where sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low. So when you test, it depends what you're catching when you test. So the full thyroid panel, it looks at all the thyroid hormones. It tells us a lot naturopathically how you're converting those, if you may be having nutritional deficiencies that could be affecting that, and other problems as well. And also we look at, very importantly, thyroid antibodies, because a lot of people have Hashimoto's, which is a autoimmune condition, and there's other thyroid autoimmune conditions as well, and it's often diagnosed way too late. So if I suspect thyroid, I like to do the full panel early on so we know what we're dealing with. So that's one. The other functional tests that are useful is gut testing, and this depends on the person, depends on their case history and their symptoms, but it's now pretty well known that the gut has a major impact on mental health. So some of the tests that I like to run is, first of all, a SIBO test, SIBO. This stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. This is a common problem where we have too much bad bacteria in the gut, and they can just cause so many problems. They release a lot of toxic byproducts that causes oxidative stress and inflammation, and can really interfere in a lot of ways, not just with your gut health, but your entire well-being. So that's a test that I like to run. Another one, there's a couple of stool tests. So one is looking at intestinal permeability. This is a common condition that can cause all sorts of systemic diseases and affect mental health as well, due to that toxicity of food not being digested properly and leaking into the blood and activating the immune system and causing inflammation. There's also comprehensive stool analysis. This can tell us lots of things, like if you're producing enough digestive enzymes and stomach acid to digest your food. It can look at what types of good bacteria you have in the gut and the numbers, so that you know which species might be too low and which probiotics you might need to take. Specifically, it can tell us if there's too much bacteria in the large intestine, in the bowel. It can tell us a lot, and so that can be really, really useful as well for anxiety, depression, and fatigue. Another test is the stress and sleep profile. So this is a salivary hormone test, and it looks at things like your melatonin, cortisol, which is a stress hormone, DHEA, which is another adrenal hormone. And this is really useful for people that are, for all of it, fatigue, anxiety, depression, burnout in particular. It tells us what's happening with the stress response. And for us as naturopaths, we like to look at which stage of adrenal dysfunction you might be in, because how we treat that, like, it changes how we treat that. Certain herbs we need to give you at kind of the beginning stages of burnout, when that cortisol's too high and you're kind of tired and wired. Then as it starts to go on, you start to become dysregulated and have sometimes high, sometimes low. You can have that feeling where you're really tired in the morning, but then you stay awake at night. You can start feeling depressed, and it goes on until you end up with really low cortisol instead of too high. So that can help us decide what herbs are best to support your stress response and to support your sleep as well. Inflammation markers, to be honest, that's actually probably what I would do as standard testing with your GP. Then looking at copper, zinc, whole blood histamine, and ceruloplasmin. So these are important because too much copper can definitely cause anxiety. Too much copper leads to excess adrenaline, and also it can block zinc, and not enough zinc can lead to anxiety, depression, lots of things, gut problems, hormone problems, because zinc is used in like hundreds of different systems in the body. And you can keep taking zinc, but if you've got too much copper, it's not going to go anywhere. So it's really important to look at that. But also those tests together, including the whole blood histamine, because histamine is also a neurotransmitter, not just involved in allergy, and too much histamine can cause anxiety. So a lot of people with anxiety also have allergy problems as well, or, hay fever, hives, that kind of thing. But this actually tells us about a bigger problem, specifically undermethylation, which can actually be corrected nutritionally. And this is more of like a genetic variation where some people are not metabolizing certain nutrients properly. A similar test in terms of looking at genetic issues that could be affecting nutrient metabolism is a Pyro test. So this is a urine test that looks at specifically pyruria. And so for some people, they just don't absorb very well certain nutrients like zinc, B6, certain essential fatty acids, and that continual deficit really affects mental health. So this is really common in social anxiety, in people that have had anxiety for a long time, particularly from childhood. OCD is common. It's common in a lot of mental health conditions, schizophrenia, bipolar, certain behavioural issues. It's common in kids. So that's one to potentially think about as well. Then there's hair tissue mineral analysis. So this is where you take a hair sample, the lab tests it for the mineral balance, but also for toxic heavy metals. So this is useful for minerals because looking at the blood is not that useful. The blood is really the transport system. It's not telling us the actual amount that's in the cell, whereas your hair reflects that. So we can sometimes diagnose mineral deficiencies better looking at the hair than looking at the blood. In fact, we typically don't test for mineral deficiencies in the blood very frequently. And also, like I say, looking at those heavy metals. If you've got too much mercury or aluminium, for example, that can absolutely affect mental health and energy levels as well. It can interfere with a lot of processes. And then the other test is called the OAT test, or the organic acids test. This test I tend to reserve more for like those really complex cases, or people that have like chronic fatigue syndrome, or like these long kind of difficult multi-system issues where we can't quite put the finger on what's happening, or if we've tried other things and we're not really getting to the bottom of it. And this tests a lot of different markers. It's a urine test. It can look at gut, it can look at neurotransmitters, but it can also look at mitochondrial function. So the mitochondria are the parts of your cell that actually produce energy. And if there's a problem with them, then you're going to have problems with, with mood and with the energy and that kind of thing. So that can be really, really useful, like I say, especially for chronic fatigue syndrome and those kinds of conditions as well. So definitely, I don't recommend these tests for everyone, certainly not. It's really a matter of, taking a really thorough case history and pinpointing what test may potentially be useful. So yeah, I hope you found these interesting. I do offer free intro naturopathic consultations via phone or online video, and if you would like one of those, then you can either, I'm going to add a link. I don't know if I've added the link on this live. I'll add it into the comments after. Otherwise, just send me a DM, or you should find it on my Facebook page as well. Or if you're watching this on my website, you'll see it in the Work With Me tab of my website. So I hope you found that interesting, and I hope it does give you hope that if you have been to the doctor and they've said, oh, there's nothing wrong with you, there are other avenues you can go down to dig a little bit deeper and find out what's going on. All right, thanks so much for watching. Bye.